Okay, it's me again. No finance this time. Today we're changing the clutch on a Renault 1.5 DCI Kangoo. So no maths, just mechanics today. Started already. Removed the battery box, and also the little injector computer. And I've tied all the wires up here out of the way to keep a bit of space. Down below there you can see the mounts we're going to have to remove later. And I've also removed the little air hose off of the gearbox. Okay, so the next task is to drain the gearbox of oil and then remove the drive shafts. I've already removed the nuts from the drive shafts while the wheels are still on the ground because they're really hard to undo. And I've also whipped off the front bumper, or nearly ripped off the front bumper, sorry. I've ripped off the valance here, which is literally just pull that off. Bumper's about to come off because I've unscrewed it. And then what we'll do is we'll get back to having a look underneath the car at draining the gearbox, removing the drive shafts. As I say, the trick is try and get as much stuff out of the way as you can, just so it's easier to get your hands in there. So next step then is to whip off that bumper, which is already undone, and also to whip off both wheels and pull out those drive shafts. Okay, so now we've removed the bumper, and you can see the kind of enormous amount more room it gives you to get around. In addition to that, the front wheel arch liners, and so you've got a load more room in here now. There's a couple of bolts up in here you have to remove to get the bumper off, so you have to take the liner off first. But once it's out of the way, you can see there's an awful lot more room to get in and get around. The car's jacked up now. I've got it on axle stands, but I've also got the spare wheel, the wheels I took off and big pieces of wood underneath, just in case. So it's held up with 4 different points in case anything slips. But as you can see, there's a heck of a lot more room now we've taken off the wheel liners and the bumpers. So the next task is to drain the oil from the gearbox underneath, and then we'll get on to removing the drive shafts. We won't take the whole hub off. What we'll do is we'll take off these 2 bolts here so that it bends back out of the way, and then we'll pull the drive shaft off just by pushing this backwards. Of course, we'll have to remove the track wire ends from the steering at the same time over this side. So these will be coming off too, and I'll use a fork breaker to push those down with a hammer, get that back out of the way, get the drive shafts out. And then we're ready for the next task, which will be starting to dismantle some more of the stuff attached to the gearbox. But I'll get those out of the way first, and I've got more room to work. Okay, as you can see, we've now got the drive shaft removed. With this side, this is the passenger side, you have to get like a little crowbar in to the, between the gearbox and the drive shaft at the far end, because there's a circlip on the shaft that holds it in place. There is a special puller, but if you're careful, little crowbar in there and you can just push the shaft out of the differential. On the other side, and of course I managed to forget this, the driver's side, you don't actually have to take the drive shaft out of the hub. You can just pull it out of the back of the gearbox, out the back of the differential, because it won't get in your way on that side, which of course then saves you disturbing the wheel bearing and saves you buying a new hub nut. So sorry about that earlier. I should have thought of that, and I've just saved myself a bit of time by not removing it from the hub. So oil's drained, hubs are out. The next thing to do is just to continue removing a few bits and pieces from around this gearbox. So I'm going to be looking to remove the bolts for the exhaust bracket. I'm going to be looking to take off a few of the the reversing light sensors, bits and pieces like that, wires, and of course the actual gear mechanism itself and the clutch mechanism, which is a cable on this one. So let's just pottering around, taking off a few bits and pieces from around the gearbox before we actually get to get the actual gearbox and differential itself right off of the car. Okay, here's a good example. We've removed the earth strap behind there, and the bracket then for this, which I think is something to do with the water system. And you can see how easy it is to get in here with the wheel liners out of the way, and back out of the way, and there you go. We're kind of getting back towards the back of the gearbox, or sorry, the front of the gearbox there, the back end of the front. Okay, so that's what I'm doing at the moment, just working my way around, taking off bits and pieces like this, you know, these electrical connections, bits and pieces like that, working my way slowly around until we've got the gearbox left only by the nuts. In a minute, what I'll also do is remove the nuts, the bolts for the starter motor. A good tip here is don't undo the wiring for the starter motor, because you don't need to take it out, you just need to push it back out the way a little bit. So those wires are really awkward to get out. I had to get at them when I changed the cam belt. So I don't want to do that again quickly. So yeah, just push those back out of the way, leave it connected, and we'll just update again in a little bit when we've taken off a few more bits and pieces. Okay, as you can see, we've dropped off the front subframe. That's surprisingly easy to take off once the bumper's out of the way. just a couple of bolts, gives you a load more room, and of course in a minute it'll help us drop the gearbox right out. The next job will be removing the rear gearbox mounting there, and also starting to undo the bolts holding the bell housing to the rear of the engine. I've got the engine held up on a jack there. You can use a strut across the top. I don't have a piece of wood or metal long enough to do that, so I'm using a jack. Not ideal, but that's kind of working for the moment. So we got the subframe off the front, just get out these engine gearbox mount there and the bell housing, and we should, oh sorry, we've also got the ones at the top to do, of course, the top hangers for the gearbox. Once we've got those off, that is the, oh there they are, that is the last part of our job then, so the gearbox is almost ready to come out. Okay, we've taken out the 4 bottom bell housing bolts and the 2 top ones, so there's 2 starter motor bolts, 2 bell housing bolts, 1 at the back, 1 at the front, 4 underneath. Now it's just a matter of sorting out that engine mount, or sorry, gearbox mount that you can see there and down through there, so they all have to come off. You just about make it out there. Gearbox cables have come off. They just pull off, you just have to wedgie them off. A bit of a nerve-wracking thing to do because it feels like you're about to break them, and hopefully I haven't. So next is that mounting there and down through here, and then hopefully after that the next picture will be the gearbox on the floor, ready for the new clutch. Little update, I've actually just whipped out the air filter box as well, which has given me a lot more room and has meant that I can get to the top of this gearbox mounting much easier. Pull that right off out of the way then. Plus of course there's more room now down around here working, so I wish I'd taken off the airbox first of all. Got to change the filter on it anyway, so that was an ideal trick. So take the air filter box out. Doesn't normally say that in any instructions I found, but has made it a lot easier. Okay, gearbox is out there, ready. There's the clutch, ready to be changed. Now you'll notice that what I've had to do is drop the rear subframe as well, or the main subframe. Not as bad as it sounds. There's just 6 bolts underneath holding it, but I had to drop it out of the way because gearbox wouldn't clear this bracket here. Once that's dropped out of the way, it's quite easy to remove the gearbox. You have to sort of, I took the other engine mount off the other side as well and lowered the engine, so it's quite a rigmarole really, but the engine's dropped down a bit now. Clear access now to the clutch, just a matter of whipping that off and sorting out the new clutch, then putting it all back together.